In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.
At the time of its release in the fall of 2001, Silent Hill 2 shook up the gaming world and revolutionized the horror genre, inspiring generations of artists for decades to come. It was unlike anything the gaming industry had ever seen before, an exploration of deeply sensitive themes told with such elegance and grace, using ingenious imagery and symbolism. A rare instance of a team of highly creative, dedicated visionaries, financed and allowed to express themselves freely to produce something truly exceptional. An instant classic held in the highest regard, and my personal favorite horror game of all time. A game that has held a place in the hearts of everyone who's played it over the past 20 years. And my goal here today is to help you understand why that is the case. Today I embark on a journey to unravel the mysteries that make SH2 an everlasting masterpiece. Welcome to the haunting world of Silent Hill 2. It's been nearly 2 decades since I first played Silent Hill 2, and although I was too young to actually understand the deeper meaning of the story, it did leave a powerful impression on me. It broadened my appreciation for compelling storytelling, music, and art in general. There was something highly intriguing about the game, so I kept replaying it over and over, going as far as unlocking every ending, all in that first year of playing it. However, I had not touched the game since then. All my love and appreciation for it was based on the experiences I had with it as a teenager. I've always considered it one of my favorite games, but had no perspective on it as an adult. To be completely honest, I was kind of intimidated of going back. I was worried about whether the game would withstand the test of time and whether the heavy subject matter is too emotionally draining now that I've matured and my capacity for comprehending it has evolved. Well, with the recent announcement of the remake, I figured it was about time I sucked it up and went back to that special place once more. This was something I had anticipated doing for years, and to say that I was excited would be an understatement. The rules for my run were simple: play at night, lights off, headphones on, total immersion, normal difficulty, no guide, and use tank controls. I have to say, stepping out into that dense fog for the first time in nearly 20 years, now as a 32-year-old man, was a distinctively nostalgic, almost emotional experience. Needless to say, I did gain a fresh perspective on the game and fell in love with it more than ever before. I want to tell you about it, so let's break it down, starting at the very beginning. The story begins in front of a mirror in a derelict public restroom as James Sunderland checks in with himself in a bland, expressionless gaze. He takes a deep breath in anticipation of the journey ahead. James has received a letter from his wife Mary telling him that she's waiting for him in their special place.
Silent Hill.
His wife passed away from a terminal disease 3 years ago, and he knows that looking for a dead person is insane. He can't explain it, but he has got the letter, and he is determined to find her. The main road into town is blocked off, so we grab our map from the car and take a route through the forest. This trail was made long deliberately to emphasize how isolated the town is. During the lengthy hike, we hear strange noises emanating from the trees, but our hero willingly marches forth with little concern for his own safety. As we'll come to learn during this video, everything in this game was meticulously designed with a purpose. The way James carelessly parked his car, left the door open, abandoned the vehicle, and is now strolling through these spooky woods on a mission to find his dead wife. All of these details should already paint a picture of his current mental state. In any case, we eventually reach the cemetery where we meet the first supporting character. Like Sunderland, Angela Orozco is also here looking for somebody, her mother.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
was
it's
just...
okay.
There's something odd about her. Her mannerisms are rather awkward, and for a teenager, she appears wary and has evidently gone through some shit. On the topic of odd behavior, some fans view the voice acting in general as awkward or subpar. I actually agree to some extent, but I reckon there are two main reasons for this. The first reason is that most of the actors that worked in this game were indeed inexperienced. So some of the delivery is naturally a bit off.
What's a little like you doing here anyway?
Huh?
The second reason is, well, because it's supposed to be awkward.
I guess.
All of these characters are plagued with trauma. They're not meant to be confident and charismatic. On the contrary, they're in an active state of suffering and anxiety. So when they communicate with each other, I think the actors were purposely trying to convey that in their performances. The fact that certain scenes are incredibly well acted further supports this claim. There's one specific monologue that is so beautifully delivered that it's downright heart-wrenching and genuinely upsetting to listen to, but we'll get to that in due time. For now, let's get back to the cemetery. Notice how in conjunction with the music, the fog, the overall aesthetic, the dialogue, and the peculiar way it's delivered all paint an aura of mystery, almost as if you're in some sort of strange, confusing dream.
I think you'd better stay away. This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Is it dangerous?
maybe. And it's not just the fog either.
I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going to town either way.
Angela's warning of danger doesn't deter our protagonist from his quest as he proceeds further into town.
Jeez.
Upon reaching the main road, he finds the town has changed since his visit with Mary. The streets that were once crowded with people are now desolate and are instead shrouded in a dense fog. Unfazed, he treads on to discover what looks to be stains of blood on the pavement. In the distance, we see a figure disappear into the misty clouds. Following the blood trail leads James to his first encounter with an otherworldly being. A horrifying creature with arms fused into its torso under a layer of skin, almost as if it's wearing a straitjacket. James pulls a loose wooden plank off the barrier and bashes it to death. This is also where we acquired the radio, which makes a comeback from the first game and serves the same purpose it did before. That is, emitting static in the proximity of moving hostile creatures and adding a great deal to the ambience of the game. Leaving the tunnel, we receive a disrupted and quite unsettling radio signal.
What the?
The map opens up and it's up to the player to figure out where to go and what to do next. It's a bit intimidating at first, but as you explore different routes, you'll quickly realize that some roads are blocked off, others have outright collapsed, which helps guiding you in navigating to the correct path. Sunderland will update his map by marking down any obstructions along with locked or jammed doors, clues, and other points of interest. So if you're diligent in your exploration, make use of the map to orient yourself and read notes and memos for clues, you shouldn't have a problem figuring out what's next. During exploration, you'll want to keep an eye out for various items and ammunition as well. Being a survival horror game, items are finite, but not exactly scarce, at least not if you're thorough. Personally, I'm the kind of player that checks every nook and cranny, so by the end I usually have an abundance of health items and ammo. So how does SH2 fare in other aspects of survival horror? Well, in my video on Resident Evil, I came to the conclusion that this is what makes a survival horror game. Of course, like with any other genre, some rules can be bent as long as you're following the main layout that Shinji Mikami so brilliantly introduced us to. Otherwise, every survival horror game would be a blatant ripoff of Resident Evil. Silent Hill 2 is a legitimate survival horror experience as it is comprised of the most vital elements of it. Inventory slots, however, are not limited. James will carry everything on him, meaning there are no item boxes either. Likewise, saving game progress doesn't require any special item, and enemies, although plenty scary, are not very challenging. That brings me to what is, in my opinion, where Silent Hill 2 is at its weakest, the combat system. The monstrosities you're confronted with on this journey are terrifying, but not at all difficult. You can easily deal with most of them using only melee weapons. Approach cautiously and simply bash away until they drop. Then administer a final stomp to finish them off. You'll quickly learn the basics of their movement, and from there on it's pretty effortless to strafe around their attacks and time your own. Unlike Resident Evil, you can even move while aiming and shooting. Still, my advice is preserving ammo for boss fights or confined areas where there are multiple targets closing in on you at once. Shooting everything in sight might not be the brightest idea. Avoiding combat altogether is quite easy too, especially in the outside areas, but even in tight corridors you can usually run past your foes with no issues. In contrast, Resident Evil required actual maneuvering around the zombies, and learning to do it effectively demanded some skill. In SH2 I found myself wiping out virtually every enemy I encountered, mostly because that radio static is fairly unnerving and I'd rather take my time and explore undisturbed, but also due to the simple fact that you easily can, and well, it's just more fun that way. While the game falls a bit short in the combat system, it more than makes up for it in other areas. When it comes to the monsters, it's their brilliantly creative design that will evoke fear, not the fighting. Human features, yet an otherworldly bizarreness in their appearance, the way they move and sound. Each creature symbolizes a multitude of core themes of the game, but we'll get to that later. I think the developers were right in not focusing on the survival aspects of the genre as heavily as the early Resident Evil games did. Think about it, having to manage your items with limited inventory slots and regularly searching for an item box would be too distracting from the narrative and just simply wouldn't mesh well with the design of this world. The reason Silent Hill 2 is regarded as one of the greatest games ever made is primarily in consequence of two things: the phenomenal storyline and the haunting atmosphere of the town itself. The harmonious composition between these two elements is extremely vital in this case. The atmosphere is so complementary to this story, and that's mainly what makes the game so outstanding. So it doesn't take long at all to find yourself fully immersed in this setting. The environment is masterfully crafted, whether it's the desolate streets soaked in a thick fog, or the derelict remains of what used to be an apartment complex, a mental hospital, a lakeside hotel. It's all eerie and terrifying, and revolting and shocking and tragic. But at the same time, there's an inexplicable beauty to it all. As distressing and melancholic as it is, it's equally artistically pleasing and mysterious, so you can't help but want to see more. There's an all-consuming sense of loneliness as you traverse this world. Sunderland never talks during gameplay. No snarky one-liners after a kill. No hints, nothing. He's quiet. He wears a cold, motionless stare, and he's utterly alone. The only time you know what he's thinking is when you examine your surroundings. So in conjunction with the absolutely beautiful soundtrack and exquisite sound design, all of this induces almost like a state of hypnosis. You feel like you're trapped in James's head, and it's a feeling that only intensifies as the story progresses. While searching around town, our lead comes upon a key on a decomposing corpse and can now pass through the Woodside apartments. The goal here is to advance further on to the southern part of Toluca Lake, as James suspects the special place Mary was referring to could be at the Rosewater Park. The Woodside apartments, like most interiors in SH2, are poorly lit. Darkness instead of fog is utilized to obscure the player's vision inside. Thankfully, in one of the first rooms we enter is a dummy figure casting light. Upon closer inspection, it's a flashlight, and the dummy is wearing an awfully familiar dress. Grabbing the torch introduces a different creature, a headless, armless mannequin. One of the things I love the most about Silent Hill 2 is how each area, each room, has something distinct and interesting to offer. The game never gets tedious because you're continuously hit with something new and unexpected. Here are a few examples from the apartment section alone. The handgun placed in a shopping cart in a room riddled with bullet holes and cartridges scattered around. The butterfly bedroom with a hole in the wall. Will you investigate? A dead guy watching TV. This. Unlocking a fire escape door, only to find that there is no fire escape. There's something stuck inside this toilet. Will you take it out? Enter this apartment and... The entire game is like this. It could be a frightening sound, disturbing imagery, or imaginative use of lighting. The level of creativity on display here is second to none. The game relies on unique moments like these to build tension and evoke fear, not cheap jump scares. When jump scares are used, they are few and far between, always subvert your expectations, and thus don't feel cheap at all. For some reason, this one got me the most on my most recent playthrough. A crucial element of any true survival horror game is of course a heavy emphasis on exploration and puzzle solving. Silent Hill 2's puzzles are exceptionally well thought out and rewarding to complete. Again, let's go through a few examples from the apartment section. One of the early puzzles in the game is this grandfather clock. There's a scribbling of a clue on the opposite side wall. Inspecting the clock, we learn that a clock key is missing. So in this case, you know what you're looking for, so when you do find the required item, it clicks in your head. Other times, however, you may come across an item that seems completely arbitrary, like this 6-pack of expired canned juice. The key word here being expired. Right, I did see a trash chute earlier in the laundry room upstairs. Then you head back downstairs and outside to see what goods fell through. And later the coins will be used for the next puzzle, and so on and so forth. One brain teaser leads to the next. Certain riddles are tougher than others, but none were unfair, and there are enough clues in the environment to get by. The puzzles will get progressively more challenging as you go, but as long as you're thorough in your exploration, picking up all the items and attentively reading all the various notes and memos, you won't run into too many hurdles. Moving on, James spots a key on the other side of these oddly placed bars. He reaches in when suddenly the key is kicked away by...
Hey, wait! Damn it.
a little girl. Back downstairs, we're startled by an urgent scream. Continuing further down the claustrophobic corridor triggers the radio static. As Sunderland anxiously advances toward the as-of-yet mysterious threat, the darkness fades to reveal a menacing figure with a triangular head. The Red Pyramid thing, more commonly known as the Pyramid Head. Instinctively, James shuts off his flashlight, desperately hoping that it didn't see him. But deep down, he knows that it doesn't matter. Deep down, he knows that it's here for him. One of my absolute favorite moments of the game. That ominous red glow is a slick touch, a pretty flawless reveal to an iconic character. On the other side of the building, a more direct confrontation takes place as we wander into the wrong apartment. The Pyramid Head is doing something or other to these mannequins, and James swiftly hides in the closet. As the beastly entity draws nearer, he unloads a full clip through the closet door in a last-ditch attempt for survival, somehow managing to keep the creature at bay. For now. In another section of the complex, we enter an apartment to a retching noise of a man puking his guts out. In the kitchen behind the fridge door is the aftermath of a horrific scene, and in the bathroom we meet Eddie Dombrowski in all his glory. He immediately reassures us that he did not kill the guy in the kitchen. James then asks about the Red Pyramid thing, but it seems Eddie doesn't even know what he's talking about, even though he has seen other monsters. He claims that he's not from Silent Hill either, to which James responds with,
You too, huh? Something just brought you here, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
Soon after that, in another apartment, we run into Angela again. This time, lying on the floor in front of a large mirror, holding a knife in her hand. She appears to be in a semi-delirious paranoid state. When Sunderland reveals that the woman he's searching for is dead, she freaks out and gets up to leave.
She's dead?
Don't worry. I'm not crazy. At least, I don't think so.
I've got to find my mama.
Before she does though, they both agree that James should hold on to the knife. As he reaches for it, she panics and rushes out. On the floor, we notice a ripped family photo. At this point, we can go ahead and leave the apartments, but for the first time ever, I decided to go back and check on Eddie before doing so. To my surprise, he was still here, and there's even some dialogue I had never heard before.
Are you still here?
Yeah, I feel kinda sick. I'll be okay soon.
You should get out of this town when you can.
I don't know why, but this moment right here sent shivers down my spine. Something about him just sitting here in total darkness for a good few hours creeped me the hell out. In the room across, I noticed these football posters plastered all over the walls. Like I said earlier, everything is there for a reason, and these posters signify something. We'll find out what soon enough. Before we can leave through the exit stairway, we run into our new friend again. Whoa, am I interrupting? The door behind us is now locked and the stairway is flooded. It's the first boss fight of the game, if you can call it that. Shooting at it is pointless. You can't kill it. All you have to do in this battle is simply dodge its massive swings and pray for the best. A sudden wailing sound of a siren summons the monster, draining the filthy water down along with it.
You! It was you, wasn't it?
Upon exiting the building, we come across the little girl again. The snotty little brat that kicked the key and stomped on his hand earlier. She's seemingly totally oblivious to the dangers of the town. Goes on to accuse James of not loving Mary and then runs away.
You didn't love Mary anyway.
Wait! How do you know Mary's name?
James finally makes it to Rosewater Park, where things get even more curious.
Mary?
Do I look like your girlfriend?
He meets a woman who, apart from her fashion sense, looks and sounds exactly like his late wife. However, as the conversation continues, it becomes increasingly more evident that this really is not Mary.
I don't look like a, ghost, do I?
Her tone, her expressions, her attitude all suggest a much more playful and assertive personality. At one point, she even begins to taunt James. And the fact that he's on a quest to seek out his dead wife doesn't seem to faze her at all.
I look like Mary, don't I? You loved her, right? Huh, or maybe you hated her.
Don't be ridiculous.
Anyway, since Mary isn't here, James sets course toward the Lakeview Hotel, where they stayed during their visit. Afraid of the monsters, Maria asks him to take her with him. Together they arrive at a bowling alley. We go in to scope it out while Maria decides to wait outside. Eddie and the child can be overheard talking. Her name is Laura and it sounds like she's on a search for Mary as well. Seeing James, she runs off again and he suggests that they follow her. However, the big man is only interested in his
Pizza!
Back outside and out of breath, Maria claims she couldn't catch up to Laura and they decide to go after her. They cut through a strip club called Heaven's Night thanks to our new partner having keys to the establishment and catch up to Laura as she enters Brookhaven Hospital, a local mental institution. The pursuit of Laura will take us through the entire facility. The dingy hallways are crowded with a new enemy type, the bubblehead nurses. Their faceless heads appear swollen, presumably choking for air as they twitch and jitter around. Upon stepping into one of the patient rooms, Maria looks unwell and starts to cough. She pops a few pills and assures James that it's just a hangover. He suggests she get some rest in response.
So comfy.
Looking for a way to open this heavily locked box, we find ourselves on the rooftop, when out of nowhere, down here, in a padded cell, we spot one of the coats smeared with blood on the padding. Ultimately, we do manage to unlock the box, only to discover that it contains nothing but a few strands of hair. The hair is later combined with a needle to fish out a key from a drain. Not long after that, we track down Laura playing with some plushies in one of the bedrooms. This time, she opens up a bit and shares that she met Mary in a hospital.
It was last year.
James is in disbelief as Mary died 3 years ago.
I'm very sorry.
But you're a doctor. It's your job to heal people. How can you just let her die?
Please, calm down. As your doctor, I promise I'll do what I can.
In any case, they go to leave together when the little brat tricks him into one of the rooms, claiming she forgot a letter from Mary and locks the door behind him. These abominations, known as flesh lips, ambush us from the ceiling in what is the game's actual first boss fight. Exterminating them triggers the siren again.
James. James.
Reality shifts in front of our eyes, presenting us with an alternate version of the hospital. When this happens, the layout of the map doesn't change, but the overall atmosphere does. Much of the interior is covered in white sheets or sports a grimier, greenish appearance. Everything feels more surreal, often featuring bizarre imagery like these hands visible behind ripped fabric desperately reaching for the items above, or this painting on a door with the arms sticking out in 3D. Additionally, the area now offers new puzzles and items, so the building needs to be re-explored in order to uncover a way out. Maria's gone from the bedroom, leaving nothing but empty medicine bottles behind. She finds us later in the basement, and things turn very awkward, very quick, as James confuses her with Mary once more.
Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I've never been so scared in my whole life. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
She then pleads with us to never leave her again. She asks about Laura, adding that she feels protective of her, even though she's never met her before. Together, they descend further down into this long, narrow hallway when the pyramid head emerges out of nowhere and starts chasing them. James makes it into the elevator at the end of the corridor. Sadly, fate has other plans for Maria as the doors slide shut right in front of her. Despite Sunderland's best efforts to pry them open, he is unsuccessful and is forced to witness her death as the pyramid head impales her with a spear right in front of him. Our hero is devastated. Laura ran off somewhere, and he failed to protect Maria. He marks his map with the next destination and heads out. Exiting the building, he has a moment of reflection. Day has turned into night, and the streets are now even more dreadful. Hanging below some mesh grating floors is a new, deformed enemy type. More demonic variants of the nurses and other monsters roam the forsaken roads. Earlier in the game, we came across a bewildering statement on the window of an abandoned bar. Coming back to it now, there's a new message on the wall next to it. If you really want to see Mary, you should just die. But you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James. All roads seem to lead to the Silent Hill Historical Society, a museum on the edge of South Vale. This is where things turn truly bizarre. The first sign of trouble is perhaps this painting. In the next room, a breach in the wall steers us down an awfully long flight of stairs. Foghorns go off during the lengthy descent, as if to warn us of the dangers ahead. We go all the way down to arrive into a room with a dark, seemingly bottomless hole in the ground. James chooses to drop down into the darkness. He lands in some sort of well. At first it looks like there's no way out, but breaking through the wall exposes a door. We go in and pass through a sewer-like area to discover a second hole that appears to be leading down a vertical hallway. The key to the gate is in a nearby room, but picking it up our flashlight dies completely and the door is now locked. So this is what the battery I found earlier at the hospital is for. The light illuminates a nasty surprise for us in the form of a dozen massive insects. You have to actually guess the correct combination on the keypad here. It's not as difficult as it sounds, as the right buttons have faded over time, but it is pretty panic-inducing as you frantically try to guess the combination. We get it right and subsequently unlock the gate door. Now remember, all of this started in a museum on the shore of a lake. Logically, this layout is impossible, but here we are, leaping into the abyss yet again. Waiting for us at the bottom is Eddie, who by the looks of things has lost his mind entirely.
Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head, pow.
He confesses to murdering the guy at the table merely for looking at him the wrong way. James challenges his reckless behavior, causing him to backtrack on his confession and split. Observing the area, we determine that we're in a defunct correctional facility called Toluca Prison. There's a gruesome, anxiety-inducing vibe down here. The place feels cursed. The psychological horror is certainly kicking into high gear, and the game has started seriously messing with the player's mind. A creepy chant resonates across the hallway outside the rusty cells. It turns out to be an invisible prisoner trapped behind bars. Stepping into another cell straight up locks you in for a brief moment. Just long enough to cause a little bit of panic. Then there's this vast field, surrounded by darkness, devoid of anything but a gallows in the center. Approaching the apparatus, sounds of galloping horses vibrate across the land. Even worse, solving the puzzle on the gallows sets off a sudden, nasty sound of a neck breaking, accompanied by a loud, agonizing scream. So how do we depart from this nightmare of a place? Well, by jumping down another hole, of course. To open the hatch, we had to combine a lighter, a horseshoe, and a wax doll, melting the wax around the horseshoe and forming a makeshift handle. Not sure how the wax is supposed to hold the weight of this door, but I still love this solution. The insanity doesn't stop here, as now we're in a filthy morgue that leads to yet another hole. Dropping down, the music turns more chaotic and, you guessed it, there's one more hole. Even James is now questioning whether or not he should keep going down. Nevertheless, he does. This drops us right in front of an open elevator that activates upon walking in and takes us on a lengthy ride down. We exit the elevator into this surprisingly simple, empty room, with nothing but a save point on the wall. Rather anticlimactic, wouldn't you say? Generally, the atmosphere down here is almost too bland. It's not what you'd expect after having traveled this deep underground. I don't know what I was expecting from all of that jumping and descending actually, but it sure as hell wasn't this. Another way of the game subverting our expectations and toying with us. The place is a maze of sorts, a flooded labyrinth with multiple paths that need deciphering. There's a missable room down here, possibly the Pyramid Head's personal lair, containing his giant sword called the Great Knife. It's super heavy and slow to use and thus highly impractical, but nonetheless cool to have as a trophy from Silent Hill if nothing else. Pyramid Head is down here too, wandering the pathways, so you have to dodge his attacks while trying to solve the maze. Eventually, we figure out the secret passageway to what is probably my favorite scene of the game.
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
As if things weren't confusing enough, Maria is down here in a cell, alive and well. Perplexed, James reminds her of the events outside the elevator and asks if she's hurt. Maria responds in an endearing tone.
You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So, you're Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
All I want from you is an answer.
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real.
Chilling. Such a well-executed scene. How she switches from a soft, endearing voice to ferociously cold, then seductive and inviting, and at one point even literally rolling her eyes at Sunderland's frustrated and confused bumbling. Moreover, this scene establishes that nothing can be taken at face value anymore. Everything is to be questioned. Not only do we not understand how this woman survived, we don't even understand who she is or what she is. All of this leaves our protagonist totally dumbfounded. But one thing is clear. He has to rescue her. On our way there, we overhear Angela pleading for mercy.
Daddy, please don't!
Her father is presented to us in the shape of a grotesque monster. Defeating him sends Angela into a violent rage. Turns out her trauma stems from the abuse she had to endure at the hands of her father. From a newspaper article just outside of here, we discovered that her father was viciously stabbed to death. She's deeply damaged by the ordeal, and in a rather tragic scene is unable to accept consolation from Sunderland. She even accuses him of only wanting one thing and is sickened by the thought alone. Before departing, she leaves him with some final remarks on his relationship with Mary.
You said your wife Mary was dead, right?
Yes. She was ill.
Liar! I know about you. You didn't want her around anymore. You probably found someone else.
That's ridiculous. I never...
On the other side of Maria's cell, we find her lying dead on the now bloodied mattress. Her face is disfigured and her expression is one of extreme agony. Again, James was unable to protect her, and again, he's forced to endure watching a woman he cared for die. Why is this happening? Leaving the cell, Sunderland is now able to escape the labyrinth through this oddly enclosed cemetery. He notices familiar names inscribed on 3 of the tombstones in the corner, each with a corresponding empty grave. He jumps down the one marked with his name and descends down a long hallway, one final time. That leads us to this freezer where Eddie is standing, gun in hand, surrounded by a bunch of corpses.
Eddie? What are you doing?
This time there are no excuses made, not an ounce of remorse. Eddie proclaims that he's had enough of people bullying and ridiculing him, and vows to kill anyone dumb enough to do so. James, in the spur of the moment, blurts out,
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
which Eddie does not appreciate in the slightest, and is now set on killing him too. You've probably noticed by this point in the video that boss fights are not the game's strong suit at all. There are no special tricks nor any weak points to hit. It's usually just run from one corner to the next, get in as many shots as you can before the enemy closes in on you, and repeat. This fight is no different, only here the poor design stands out even more, as it looks extra silly seeing 2 humans standing right in front of each other exchanging gunfire. Regardless, the fight moves from the freezer to the meat locker. Eddie delivers a passionate speech on the effect that all the unprovoked bullying has had on him. Furthermore, he divulges that the reason he's on the run is because he shot and killed a dog, injuring its owner in the process as well.
He's gonna have a hard time playing football on what's left of that knee.
James's attempt to criticize his actions is met with an interesting response.
Don't get all holy on me, James. This town called you too. You and me are the same. We're not like other people. Don't you know that? Let's party!
The battle resumes. At least here you can employ some strategy, using the meat to hide and catching him by surprise. Finally, after a few well-placed shots, Eddie collapses.
Eddie? Eddie? I killed a human being. A human being.
Our hero is appalled by what he has done. Killed a human being. The shocking moment evokes an internal question.
Mary. Did you really die 3 years ago?
We evacuate the building and follow the pier to find a small rowing boat. The Lakeview Hotel is on the other side of the Toluca Lake, so we take the boat out and follow a faint source of light across. In front of the hotel, Sunderland notes that the place hasn't changed at all since their visit. What struck me immediately inside the hotel was how neat and tidy the place was. Relatively speaking, of course. Needless to say, it's still equally bleak and creepy in its own way, and for some reason, feels even lonelier. Silence is used to great effect here. For the most part, roaming the gloomy premises, you just hear your footsteps. There's a sense that it's all building up to something crucial, which it is. The minimal sound design also aids in giving this place an aura of sorrow. There's a tragic quality to the immaculate and cozy interior, corrupted by the dark and eerie emptiness. In the restaurant, Laura startles us with the piano. She's a lot more approachable this time and finally lets James read the letter she got from Mary. In the letter, Mary writes that she loves Laura like her own daughter and was hoping to adopt her. Things turned out differently. The letter ends with Mary wishing her a happy 8th birthday. The shocking part about this is that Laura turned 8 last week, confirming once again that Mary couldn't possibly have died 3 years ago. So now our goal is to retrieve the videotape that James forgot and gain access into the room that he and his wife stayed in during their visit. Curiously, personal messages left specifically for Sunderland can be seen on the map and as a memo in the reception, giving us a sense that we're being watched at all times. Room 312 is labeled with a note saying,
Waiting for you.
It's on the 3rd floor, which, of course, is locked for now. Before we can get up there, we're tasked with rigorously searching the entire hotel, mainly to acquire the videotape and the necessary keys. The hotel, much like the rest of the locations, offers its fair share of fun and creative puzzles. This bedroom, for instance, with a locked briefcase and photos scattered all over the bed. One of the photos has been colored over with a marker, so we used the thinner that we came upon earlier in the basement, uncovering the briefcase code. Soon after, we're forced to store all of our weapons and items into a locker to gain access to an elevator and take it down to the employee section of the establishment. Exploring that part of the building with no flashlight and no weapons was pretty tense. The fact that you can't read the map in the dark didn't help either. Thankfully, there weren't too many enemies to deal with back here, but the true terror, of course, lies in the anticipation of danger. This storage room always stood out to me for some reason. All of the food here is either rotten or expired. It's as if all the people just vanished into thin air. These kinds of details give this place the tragic ambience I was talking about earlier. Opening a can of light bulbs was required in another puzzle, with one of them being used to illuminate a too dark to see keyhole in the bar. Anyway, we eventually locate the videotape in one of the employee offices and can now head up to room 312 to play it.
Are you taping again? Come on.
On the tape, Mary talks about feeling at peace in Silent Hill and asks her husband to promise to take her back someday. The recording then cuts to unveil an entirely different scene altogether. Horrified, James sits in silence as the awful truth sinks in. The music elegantly captures what he must be going through in this moment. It starts somber and slow for the initial shock and heartbreak, and then picks up as his mind starts racing, trying to grasp what he has done. Laura marches in, wondering if he has found Mary. He has no choice but to confess. Devastated and angry, she storms out of the room. That's when another message comes through the radio. This time, it's not distorted. It's Mary asking James to come find her, that she's waiting for him nearby. We leave room 312 to a wildly different version of the hotel, which is now in utter despair. The environment has morphed into a wet, burnt, flooded mess. The music continues to channel Sunderland's state of mind. If anxiety was a melody, this is how I imagined it'd sound. On top of that, the leaking drops of water convey an illusion that the world is weeping with you. doors teleport you to seemingly random parts of the hotel, and all of this combined creates a perception that James is adrift in chaos, utterly shattered by the grim revelation of killing his wife. Looking back, all those cryptic comments made by the other characters are starting to make sense now. And remember that mysterious radio message from the beginning of the game? Well, here's how it sounds undistorted.
James, I'm here. Come to me. James, I'm waiting for you. Why did you kill me? James.
What the? What about that mannequin wearing a dress? It's the same dress Mary was wearing on the videotape recording. The message on the wall is not so enigmatic anymore. A competent mystery plot must always give the audience a chance of solving it without it being too obvious. When the truth is ultimately revealed, you ought to feel like you should have seen that coming, but didn't. Silent Hill 2 was feeding us hints the entire time, and all the dots are now connecting. But how is all this possible anyway? How did James get a letter from a dead person? What is actually going on in this town? To answer these questions and more, let's progress a bit further into the story. The now flooded basement floor leads us to a stairway engulfed in flames. Angela is here. By this point, we've figured out that she's responsible for killing both her abusive father and brother. That's what brought her to Silent Hill. She momentarily mistakes James for her mother, claiming she's the only one left now before Angela can rest, likely alluding to the perception that she has to kill her mother as well as a means of ending her own torment. She goes on to add that her mom was not helpful during the abuse, telling her that she deserved what she had to endure. She also states that she wishes James had never saved her and asks for the knife back. He refuses, at which point she turns around and ascends into the blazing fire. Sunderland pushes on through the disarray until he reaches this large-scale chamber. A pair of pyramid heads tower menacingly over him from the podium above. They've hung Maria up on display, awaiting his arrival for the purpose of executing her in front of him. Once again, James drops down to his knees. Finally, all becomes clear. He recognizes the true nature of his circumstances and is now ready to confront reality.
I was weak. That's why I needed you. Needed someone to punish me for my sins. But that's all over now. I know the truth. Now it's time to end this.
What James is referring to here is the part of his subconscious mind that desired punishment for his repressed crime. The Pyramid Head is the manifestation of that desire brought forth by the mysterious power of Silent Hill. As previously mentioned, something called Sunderland to this place. Only now we realize that it was the town itself summoning him to face his demons. This is what Silent Hill 2's story is mainly concerned with, the impact of trauma on different people and how they cope with it. Ed is a victim of lifelong bullying due to his weight issues and overall appearance. His descent into madness in the end saw him turn into a vindictive, cold-blooded psychopathic killer. Angela's abuse, on the other hand, left her detached, utterly broken, and ultimately suicidal. The agony of watching the love of his life slowly perish caused James to smother her to death, which consequently threw him into a state of self-induced dissociative amnesia. Depending on your actions throughout the game, he will either transcend and overcome his suffering or become a helpless victim of it. The town has summoned these three people in particular on a quest of possible redemption because they all have a thing in common. They're all guilty of a crime of passion. We already know what James is guilty of, but the dog Eddie shot and killed belonged to one football player who relentlessly bullied him even after they had graduated high school. After killing the dog, he shot the bully in the knee, crippling him and cutting his football career short. Similarly, years of abuse caused Angela to mentally snap as well, stabbing her father and brother to death in retaliation. None of this information is explicitly laid out to us. It's up to the player to piece it all together based on what the characters say and other evidence found in the world. Eddie's crime is hinted at with the football posters in the apartment section. And Angela's initial homicide of her father is discovered in a partially censored newspaper article right before the abstract daddy battle. The bloody knife she left us with earlier pretty much confirms it. Regardless, it is for these reasons, for the crimes that they are guilty of, that the power of Silent Hill has called them and manifested a personal hell for each of them, conjured up from the depths of their unconscious psyches. The way they perceive the environments, the events that unfold within them, and the creatures encountered along the way are all unique to each one of them and stem from some aspect related to the guilt and trauma they bear. At times, their realities may intersect. Here, James can be seen literally crossing over into Eddie's nightmare as the hallway leading into the freezer turns blood red as he draws nearer to the entrance. Through this, they catch a glimpse into one another's misery. For instance, Eddie's nightmare exhibited reoccurring acts of brutality, matching his violent outbursts. Insecurity around his weight was on full display in the meat locker, in the shape of obese, humanoid chunks of meat hanging from the ceiling. Angela's abuse was presented via a disturbing depiction of her childhood home, a fleshy interior with numerous orifices on the walls, within which pistons make thrusting motions. And later, the stairway on fire is how Angela perceives the world around her. The flames representing her agony and the two humanoid torsos encased in stretched skin are manifestations of her father and brother. Silent Hill being a place where guilt-ridden, broken people are forced to tackle the darkest parts of their psyches explains why Laura, an innocent child, is so playful and carefree around the town. Locking us up in that hospital room was but a childish prank, not an act of actual malice. The very real dangers that plague the minds of the adult characters are simply non-existent from her point of view. The dangers that appear to Sunderland in the shape of monsters consist essentially of a clutter of various emotions, urges, and intrusive thoughts, kindled from the subconscious mind of a man who had to endure the excruciating process of watching his wife gradually and painfully deteriorate to a horrible disease. The monsters, therefore, rarely symbolize just one thing. They're an intricate and confusing muddle of all sorts of unwanted emotions of inner torment, such as sorrow, anger, grief, resentment, disgust, anguish, sexual frustration, hatred, and denial, and include characteristics of deformities brought on by disease, among other themes of sickness. Notice how most of the creatures bear a female shape, roughly the same size as Mary. They all represent her illness and demise, at least in some way. The nurses, with their swollen, wrapped-up heads, seem to be suffocating, mirroring the way in which Mary met her end. The flesh lips are confined to a bed frame, and the frantic movement of the mouth represents Mary's verbal abuse of her husband in her final days. The mannequins are partial representations of Sunderland's natural sexual urges during Mary's hospitalization. The lying figures are reminiscent of hospital patients writhing in agony, helplessly constricted by sickness. The foul smoke they spew could also be illustrating insults or perhaps replicating Mary's cough. These are just a few examples of what the monsters could be symbolizing. Like I said earlier, none of them depict just one thing. They all feature a wide array of facets of disease, with an element of visual eroticism so as to capture the full spectrum of emotions and urges likely experienced by someone losing their partner in this manner. One very common misconception about Silent Hill 2 is, in my opinion, everybody's overly heavy focus on James's
sexual frustration.
While that is certainly a part of why so much of the imagery features eroticism, it's not all exclusively directly related to his frustration. More importantly, sex is one of the core elements of this game. It's the infrastructure, the foundation on which the psychological horror of SH2 is built upon, designed to unsettle the player at the deepest level. The fundamental style of this game relies on disturbing the audience by blending the sexuality within the horrific imagery in an attempt to
shake human's heart, deeply.
Let's take a closer look at the two male-shaped creatures now, the abstract daddy and the red pyramid thing. The abstract daddy is first encountered as a manifestation of Angela's traumatic experiences at the hands of her father and brother. It's important to note that the monster does not appear to us in the same way it does to Angela. It's likely a lot more disturbing from her perspective, for obvious reasons. James sees the monster filtered through his own psyche, a sickening fusion of Angela's tragedy and Mary's bedridden state. Now, the Red Pyramid thing, undoubtedly the most iconic creature in the entire series. I briefly mentioned that this thing represents Sunderland's desire for punishment, but of equal importance, its aim is to remind him of his crime and awaken him from his delusion. Everything it does throughout the game is done with those motives in mind. Assaulting the other monsters and repeatedly executing a reincarnating Maria is all for the purpose of inflicting the punishment that James feels he deserves and breaking him free of his delusion. The Pyramid Head is a reflection of James Sunderland, buried in the darkest depths of his subconscious mind, mirroring the part of himself that is afraid to look at. Similarly, Maria is a reflection of Mary, perhaps partly depicting a more ideal version of her from Sunderland's frame of mind. As far as I'm concerned, she's the single most complex and fascinating character in the game, serving a multitude of vital roles in the story. Ultimately, she's both a positive and simultaneously negative force in Sunderland's life, depending on the conclusion he chooses to arrive at by the end. She's a manifestation or a mental construct of his delusional imagination, made real by the town. His inability to bear the despicable act of suffocating his ailing wife is partially the reason for her existence. At the same time, she was born out of his desperate desire to see his wife again and to fill the void she has left in his soul. Born from a wish, if you will. In addition, her fashion sense, seductive mannerisms, and overall sexual extroversion could indicate that she, at least fractionally, illustrates the part of Mary James was craving toward the end of her life, where she was horribly disfigured and disabled. Of course, she's the subject of his punishment as well, and perhaps even a symbol of temptation, a test of loyalty toward his wife. Her personality is equally varied, stretching across a wide spectrum of unpredictable traits. At times she's soft and tender, then moody, then flirtatious, then helpless and clingy, or rude and insensitive. You never know what to expect out of her, and that's precisely what makes her so compelling. Molded specifically and solely for Sunderland, she never crosses paths with any other humans, and is, as a matter of fact, invisible to them. For instance, as James is about to enter Pete's Bowlerama, she claims to
hate bowling,
and then shortly after is not actually physically seen chasing Laura. Given that Laura is actively searching for Mary, it's highly unlikely that she'd run away from someone who looks exactly like her. On a number of occasions, she assures us that she's real. I interpret this as Sunderland's mind scrambling to protect his own delusion, as I believe Maria herself is actually aware of her true nature by this point. Regardless, she's a highly complex character that can either serve to aid our protagonist in his awakening or condemn him into a state of purgatory, should he decide to indulge in lustfulness and delusion. Before we move on, I'd like to briefly clarify something in case anybody misunderstood. All the supernatural, weird shit happening in the town is not a hallucination occurring solely in the confines of the characters' minds. It's all real. Silent Hill has the mysterious power to manifest fragments of its victims' psyches and make them invade reality. So even though all of the frightening noises, terrifying monsters, and sinister environments are unique to each character and are not experienced at all by some, it's all still, in actual fact, occurring in the real world. The same goes for when the setting shifts into a more hellish version, or day turns into night right before your eyes. The spiritual power of the town has the ability to cause these physical changes in reality. So with all that in mind, we now have a better understanding of the personal nightmare the town has constructed for James, why the rotting corpses around town are in fact brutalized versions of him, how dropping down into dark, bottomless holes symbolizes his voyage of digging deeper into his own mind, confronting the unknown. The 3 graves are dug for the 3 guilty people, while the letter from Mary fades in our inventory and later disappears completely as the delusion dissolves, and why the duo of pyramid heads in this lobby finish themselves off once our hero exhibits the will to survive and in turn eliminates the self-destructive part of his mind. It's feasible that the reason there were 2 of them here is because James by this point has 2 human victims.
James!
Before seeing the story to its conclusion, let's take a moment to contemplate on the insane few days James must have had prior to his arrival to Silent Hill. Earlier, we established that Mary couldn't have died that long ago. That begs the question, where did James get 3 years ago from? Well, in the hotel library, we came across a cassette player containing a recording of the conversation Sunderland had with Mary's doctor when he first learned of her illness. The tape reveals that she contracted the disease 3 years ago. Metaphorically, to James, she succumbed to it in that instance, which later, in his delusional state, he accepted as reality. We found out from Laura that Mary was alive in the week leading up to the events of the game. So in all likelihood, James suffocated her less than a week ago, suffered a severe mental breakdown that resulted in self-induced amnesia, was called to their special place by the spiritual power of the town, and then drove there with the body of his wife in the back of the car. So it's not at all outside the realm of possibility that Mary is in the car that we pick up the map from at the beginning of the game. Visualizing all of that makes the game even more chilling in my opinion.
Mary?
What do you want, James?
I brought you some flowers.
Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already.
Mary, what are you saying?
Look, I'm disgusting. I don't deserve flowers. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here! Leave me alone already! I'm no use to anyone.
After the two pyramid heads impale themselves, we're free to leave the hotel through the final hallway. Crossing said hallway, we get an idea of the state Mary was in near the end of her life as we listen to her berating her husband in an exchange they had before her death. If we choose to stay and hear her out, we discern that the apparent anger is actually a desperate cry of fear.
James! Wait! Please don't go! Stay with me! Don't leave me alone! I didn't mean what I said! Please, James! Tell me I'll be okay! Tell me I'm not going to die! Help me!
Evacuating the hotel and ascending a large metal stairway, we reach the top of an abandoned building in the early morning hours of a rainy day. Waiting for us up here is Maria, now fully restyled as Mary. Realizing it's not his wife, James rejects her, asserting that he doesn't need her anymore. Distressed, she pleads with him, telling him that unlike his wife, she'll never yell at him or make him feel bad. Still, he insists that it's time to end this nightmare, enraging Maria and prompting her to transform into a demonic monster.
Mary?
Killing the hideous creature sparks a final meeting with Mary, granting James the opportunity to explain his heinous crime and ask for forgiveness. In this case, she does forgive him, encouraging him to go on with his life, and then handing him a letter. The game ends with James leaving Silent Hill together with Laura, whom he presumably adopted. At least that's what happens in the Leave ending. The game has a total of 6 endings, all with vastly different outcomes. No specific ending is canonical, but only 3 of them seem actually plausible, while the rest are more suited as merely bonus material. The in-water ending sees Sunderland arriving to the conclusion that he's unable to live without Mary, so he carries her out to the car and speeds off, driving straight into the Toluca Lake. Himself as a result. He figured that the reason he was called to Silent Hill was to rejoin his wife in death. In the Maria ending, James confronts a manifestation of Mary instead as the final boss. She's infuriated with him and does not forgive him for his actions. Upon defeating her, he reunites with Maria in Rosewater Park and declares that he wants her to be with him. Together, they leave to escape the town when Maria develops an all too familiar cough, inciting James to voice an eerily unsettling response.
You'd better do something about that cough.
The delivery of the Alliance sounds absolutely sinister. Refusing to accept reality and choosing to delve deeper into his delusion, Sunderland is doomed to relive the nightmare and as a consequence, endlessly dwell in torment. Unlike most games that rely on boring dialogue options or QTE choices to determine the ending, SH2's endings are tied to how you play the actual game itself. The process is based entirely on your decisions during gameplay, so if you act suicidally, keeping your health status low by not healing when injured, or frequently examining Angela's knife in your inventory, James will commit suicide. Spent too much time around Maria, staying in close proximity and taking extra good care of her, James will escape the town with her. To make amends with Mary and leave the town with Laura instead, take good care of yourself by patching up your wounds, regularly inspect Mary's photo and letter, and for the most part, ignore Maria. This is honestly one of the more interesting multiple ending systems I've seen, and I'm surprised more developers haven't attempted a similar approach since. These three endings are essentially metaphors for the approach Sunderland chooses to deal with the loss of his wife. They're all equally plausible depending on how you decide to interpret the story. The fact that they are all equally plausible and work in harmony with the rest of the plot without retconning anything is a testament to the sharp writing. Personally, the leave ending always made the most sense to me, but I can see the significance in all of them. Regardless, the climax of each main ending has Mary reading the letter she left for James before she passed in its entirety. The letter is read over a deafening silence. No background music necessary, as her emotional delivery is so authentic, it's palatable. Actress Monica Taylor Horgan did a remarkable job shifting between Mary and Maria in this game, but this closing monologue by her is simply outstanding and is easily one of the most painfully raw and heartbreaking pieces of voice acting I've ever heard. It's only right that we conclude the main plot discussion with a few passages from the letter.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. When I first learned that I was going to die, I just didn't want to accept it. I was so angry all the time, and I struck out at everyone I loved most. Especially you, James. That's why I understand if you do hate me. But I want you to know this, James. I'll always love you. These last few years since I became ill, I am so sorry for what I did to you, did to us. You've given me so much, and I haven't been able to return a single thing. That's why I want you to live for yourself now. Do what's best for you, James. James, you made me happy.
Silent Hill 2 features a superb sub-scenario, shedding some light into the origin and nature of Maria. In the hours leading up to her encounter with James, Maria awakens to a deserted town. Everyone has mysteriously vanished, and now only strange monsters roam the barren streets. Facing a mirror, she contemplates on what to do next, literally mirroring the opening of the main scenario. She admits lacking a purpose to go on living, but at the same time has an intense fear of pain and death. Moreover, she seems to have an inexplicable urge to find somebody, partly because of the notion of loneliness is unbearable too. Stepping out of the back room, we recognize that we're in Heaven's Night, the strip club she helped unlock during the pursuit of Laura. Outside, a small section of the town is open for exploration before we quickly locate an entrance leading to the Baldwin mansion, where most of the events of this scenario transpire. In contrast to the filthy, run-down locales of the main game, the mansion is in surprisingly excellent shape. Traversing and uncovering more of this place was a real treat, on account of it all being so detailed, polished, and captivating. Just like in the main game, no two rooms are identical, so you never know what to anticipate behind each closed door. You get a couple of new weapons on this journey, but otherwise the gameplay and general concept is unaltered. Carefully search the residence, solving various puzzles and collecting any and all items you see along the way. While in sublime condition, the mansion does appear to be completely abandoned. That is, until we attempt to open this door that gets abruptly shut from the inside. The man on the other side, introduced to us as Ernest Baldwin, claims he has no interest in company.
You want to be alone in this insane asylum?
Yes, exactly. But how can you say that it's this town that's insane? Perhaps it's we who are insane. Both of us. Hopelessly insane.
An enigmatic persona, to say the least. We'll leave him for now to see what else we can uncover in this desolate palace. As we poke around the place, it becomes increasingly more evident that something is not quite right. Apart from the bizarre noises, the environment itself comes across as somewhat surreal with its long, cramped hallways and odd layout.
Oh no, she fell in the window! Don't move her!
What happened?
Moments like these are especially unnerving since Maria never acquires a flashlight. Nevertheless, amid the discomfort, there's still an alluring side to this place. Whether it's the main lobby, illuminated by the natural light outside, the cozy living room and the vintage decor, the hidden last resting place reached through the chimney, saturated with beautiful vegetation, this cute little kid's room, the attic that you light up with candles, or just a simple dimly lit lounge room with the clouds of fog serenely passing by beyond the window frames. Such a distinct, charming quality to it all, and yet tragedy lies at the root of this place as well. 10 years ago, on Ernest Baldwin's birthday, a little girl named Amy, attempting to retrieve a birthday card for her dad, accidentally fell to her death out of the attic window. Obtaining the birthday card and leaving the attic, Maria hears a voice.
Give it to my daddy.
An emotional Ernest is grateful when we bring him the card, after which he makes a rather curious statement.
Maria? So you must be... That's why you could see me.
Huh?
So perhaps that means that I can hope for a miracle as well.
What do you mean?
He then asks us to bring him a vial of liquid from the nearby apartment building, supposedly intending to perform a ritual to resurrect his daughter. And with that, we exit the mansion via the back door and spot an interesting graffiti tag, warning us of something we no doubt already had suspicions of. Following a very brief trip to the Blue Creek apartments, we return to Baldwin with the requested item. In this third and final conversation with him, it's evident that he knows more about Maria than he initially led on. He mentions that she was born in this town, and the discussion even diverts to Sunderland at one point.
That James, he's a bad man.
James.
In the end, Maria finally opens the door to discover that no visible entity is occupying the room beyond. Gazing into the abyss, she appears to have a moment of realization, recognizing her true nature. Born from a Wish is a short but marvelous little story that manages to contribute a great deal to the bigger picture in a minimal and concise telling. To me, it's evident that Maria was conceived on the day this story begins, and throughout the unraveling of the plot, she's still in the process of developing into her true form. At first, she's aimless, expressing not having a reason to live at all, but then gradually begins to obtain Mary's thoughts, feelings, and desires. The brief pause before revealing her name to Ernest is one way of showing us that she's still adapting into her new role. The extreme angst around pain and death is obviously reflecting Mary's illness, while the invasive thoughts of Laura are a sign of her adopting Mary's caring, benevolent side. It also goes to further support that she isn't strictly a manifestation of Sunderland's imagination, but was rather created by the town itself, for the variety of nuanced reasons specified earlier. Furthermore, we get additional evidence that she indeed is not inherently evil, displaying a compassionate and helpful side in the aid of Baldwin. There's a sentiment that she's initially willfully ignorant of her true nature, abruptly interrupting Ernest as he's about to disclose what she really is. And then later, in the face of reality, she considers ending it all, but ultimately yields to her purpose. Tossing the revolver signifies to me that she's choosing to let go of her own personal battle, surrendering instead to the path that she was incarnated for, and coming to terms with her destiny.